Wednesday, the middle of the week, the hinge, the day that is neither the beginning nor the end, neither the promise nor the reckoning. Just the middle, just the place you pass through on your way from one side to the other. I come to the village on Wednesdays. Not always, not every Wednesday without fail, not with the precision of the Tuesday rehearsal room or the Monday coffee shop, but often enough that it's become something I think of as mine. Wednesday in the village, in the late afternoon, when the light does what it does down here, which is different from the light anywhere else in the city. The light in the village at 4 in the afternoon in November is... I've been trying to find the right word for years and I haven't found it yet. It comes through the trees, what's left of the leaves, and it hits the old brick of the buildings at an angle that makes the brick look warm, even when nothing is warm. Makes the street look like it belongs to a different century, which it almost does. Some of these buildings are from a century ago, from 2 centuries ago, from a time when this neighborhood was something else entirely, before it became the place where people come to figure out what they think. I come here for Elise, but also, and this is the part I'm going to try to tell you today, the harder part, I come here for the other thing. The thing the village has that Midtown doesn't. The permission. Permission to not have decided yet. Permission to be in the middle of something with no clear end in sight and have that be not a failure, but the actual condition of being alive and trying to make something. Elise Hartman. Where do I start with Elise? I start at the beginning, I suppose, which is 1942. The beginning is a drafty loft on Bleecker Street that Elise shared with 2 other painters and a sculptor named Gerald, who was very serious about the sculpture and less serious about cleaning, a fact about which Elise had clear and frequently expressed opinions. I met her at a party, not a glamorous party, a village party, which means a gathering of people in a space that holds approximately half of them comfortably, with bad wine in good company, and conversation that runs from the brilliant to the insufferable and back again over the course of an evening, sometimes within the same conversation. Someone introduced us, I don't remember who. I remember Elise. She was standing near the window looking out at the street below with an expression I couldn't immediately classify. Not bored, not sad, not distracted. Attending to something. That's the word. She was attending to the street below with the focused attention of someone for whom looking is a professional act, a gathering, a way of storing material. She turned around and looked at me with the same quality of attention and said, "You're an actress." I said, "How did you know?" She said, "You came in and immediately checked where the other people were. And then you found a position. You found a position in the room." I thought about this. I said, "Is that what I did?" She said, "That's what you did." Then she said, "I do something similar. I come into a space and I look for the light." That was the beginning of Elise. She paints things that don't look like things. I said this yesterday and I want to say it more carefully now, because things that don't look like things is both accurate and unfair. What Elise paints is, she paints what she calls the interior of the visible. Not what things look like from the outside, but what they feel like from the inside. The experience of them rather than the appearance of them. I watched her paint once. Not often. Elise painting is a private act, and she shares it rarely, and being allowed to watch is a thing she gave me slowly, over months of friendship, before she trusted that I would receive it without the wrong kind of comment. The wrong kind of comment, with Elise's work, is, what is it? The right kind of comment, the only kind that has any relationship to what she's doing, is silence, or if words, words that are about what you feel rather than what you see. She showed me a canvas once, a large one, mostly blue, but with a seam of something warm running diagonally through it, and she said, "Tell me what you feel." Not what do you see, What do you feel? I stood in front of it for a while and I said, I feel like I just remembered something I didn't know I'd forgotten. She said, Good, and turned back to the canvas. That is Elise's language. Feeling as information. Sensation as content. I find it useful, actually. As an actress, the question is never what the character looks like from the outside. The question is always what she feels like from the inside. What it is to be her, not to observe her. Elise asks the same question with different tools and arrives at different answers, but the question itself is the same. This is why we are friends. We are asking, in our separate ways, the same question. Today I went to see Elise's studio. She has a new studio. She moved in September from the Bleecker Street loft, which she finally outgrew after 5 years in a combination of producing too many large canvases and tolerating too many years of Gerald's approach to cleaning. The new studio is on West 10th Street, on the 3rd floor of a building that used to be something industrial. You can still feel it in the bones of the place, the ceiling height, the windows large enough to flood the space with light, which is what drew her to it. I went at 2 o'clock. The walk from the subway to her building takes you through the village in a way that requires no hurry, no purpose, just the willingness to be walked through. The streets here don't follow the grid. They wander. They cross each other at angles that Midtown would find irregular. They lead you somewhere different from where you expected. I have gotten mildly lost in the village dozens of times, and I have not found this unpleasant, because getting mildly lost in the village means you discover a bookshop you didn't know existed, or a cafe that's been there since before you were born, or a window with something in it that you'll think about for the next week. Today I found a window with a coat in it, not the mink I mentioned on Monday. Something simpler. A gray wool coat, very clean lines, the kind of thing that looks like it was designed by someone who understood that the best design is the design you don't notice because it's exactly right. I stood at the window for a minute looking at it. Then I walked on. I don't know why I'm telling you about the coat, except that it seems true to what Wednesdays are. The day when you notice small, beautiful things that you can't quite account for, that don't fit neatly into any category, but that stay with you, that seem to mean something, or at least seem to contain something, even if you can't say what. Elise was in the middle of something when I arrived. Not the middle of a painting. She was in the middle of a thought about a painting, which is different and in some ways harder. The thought about the painting is the stage where you can still lose it, where the whole thing can dissolve back into nothing if the wrong thing happens, if the light shifts, or the phone rings, or someone walks in and says the wrong thing in the wrong tone. I said nothing when she let me in. I put my coat on the hook inside the door, and I sat in the chair she keeps in the corner for visitors, and I didn't say anything for about 10 minutes. Elise appreciated this. After the 10 minutes, she put down the brush she was holding. She'd been holding it, not using it, just holding it while she stood in front of the canvas, and she turned around and she said, "Okay, tell me about Thursday." She knew about Thursday through a form of information transfer that is less telephone or letter and more simply, Elise knows things. She has an almost uncanny awareness of the significant events in the lives of people she cares about, an antenna tuned to the frequency of things that matter to her people. I told her about Thursday. The director. I said the name this time, to Elise, because with Elise saying the name is not bad luck, it's simply information. The project, the description. A woman who looks like she knows something. Elise listened in the way she listens, which is completely. When Elise listens to you, you have her entire attention. Every part of her that usually goes toward looking and recording and attending, directed now at you. And it feels, I won't pretend it isn't intense, it feels like being fully seen, which is something everyone wants and almost everyone finds when they actually get it, somewhat more than they bargained for. She said, "Are you scared?" I said, "Of course." She said, "Good." I said, "That's what Jack said." She said, "Jack is right, which I'm not going to make a habit of saying." She doesn't particularly like Jack. Not with dislike. More with the moderate skepticism that she applies to most people who are charming, which she regards as a potential disguise for something less interesting underneath. She has applied this skepticism to Jack for the 8 months I've known him and has not yet revised it to my knowledge. Jack, for his part, finds Elise very village, which is his diplomatic way of saying she is too willing to prioritize truth over comfort, a quality he values in theory and finds mildly alarming in practice. They are both right about each other. This is the best-case scenario for two people who don't particularly like each other. We talked for 2 hours. I want to tell you what we talked about because it matters, not just as conversation, not just as the texture of this particular Wednesday, but as something I've been turning over since I left, something that has a weight to it. We talked about what it means to make things. This sounds abstract, so let me be specific. Elise has been struggling. Not with the painting. The painting is going well. She has more ideas than she has canvases. She's in that period of productive urgency that comes sometimes to artists, and that she describes as terrifying in the best way. She's been struggling with the question underneath the painting, the question of whether it matters. She said, "Who is this for?" I said, "The paintings?" She said, "The paintings, the plays you work on, the performances. Who is any of it for? 50 people see a canvas in a gallery. 200 people see a play. The world goes on. The news is what the news is. Why are we doing this?" I've thought about this question before. I think about it on the bad mornings, when the percentage is low, and the weight of everything is more present than the possibility. On those mornings, the question doesn't feel philosophical. It feels personal and urgent and unanswered. But today, this Wednesday afternoon, in Elise's studio with the light coming through the big windows, I had an answer. Or something close to one. I said, "You know what people did during the war? In the actual war. In the camps, in the shelters, in the places where the worst things were happening?" Elise looked at me. I said, "They put on plays. They drew pictures. They wrote things down. With whatever they had, in whatever circumstances they were in, they made things. Not because it would stop anything, not because it would change the news, but because the making was itself the proof. The proof that they were still there, that something human was still present, that you could put something between yourself and the darkness that wasn't more darkness." Elise was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you believe that?" I said, "I believe it more on Wednesdays than on Tuesdays." She almost smiled. With Elise, the almost is as good as the thing. I need to tell you about the other name on my list. I told you about Danny on Monday. One door, I said. I opened one door. The other name is my father. He didn't go to the war. He was too old. He was 51 in 1941, which is the age where they thank you for offering and send you home. But the war came for him anyway, the way it came for everyone, in the specific form it takes when you're the one who stays. He had a hardware store on Amsterdam Avenue in the 80s. He'd had it since before I was born. He was in that store when I was born, my mother said. He left for the hospital with paint still on his hands. The store was his in the way that things are yours when you've built them from nothing, when every object in them has a history you carry, when the smell of the place is indistinguishable from the smell of your own life. During the war, the supply chains broke down. The things you needed to run a hardware store stopped arriving reliably. Then started arriving at prices that the prices you could charge couldn't keep up with. Then started arriving less. Then sometimes stopped. My father managed this for 3 years, with the specific stubbornness of a man who has never walked away from anything in his life and doesn't intend to start. He walked away in 1944. Not because he chose to, exactly, because the circumstances chose for him, which is a distinction that mattered to him enormously, and that I have spent years trying to understand properly. He closed the store in February 1944, 2 months after my mother got sick, with a quietness that was more frightening than any anger would have been. He simply closed it, put a sign on the door, stood on the sidewalk outside for a few minutes. I was there, I watched, and then walked away. He's still walking away, in some sense. He lives in Queens now, in an apartment near my cousin's family, and he's fine. I want to say that clearly. He is fine. He eats, he reads, he has opinions about baseball that he delivers with some of his old energy. He is not broken. But something in him closed when the store closed, some door that I haven't been able to find the key to. And in the 3 years since, I've been learning the particular discipline of loving someone through a closed door. I talk to him twice a week, Tuesday and Saturday. Tuesday I call him, Saturday he calls me, which is a rhythm we established without discussing it, and that has become, in its reliability, one of the fixed points of my week. We talk about baseball and the weather, and what I'm working on, and what he's cooking, and the state of Amsterdam Avenue, which he still follows because once a neighborhood is yours, it stays yours, regardless of your relationship to it. We don't talk about the store. We don't talk about my mother. We don't talk about Danny, who my father liked, and who my father grieved in the way he grieves things, which is quietly and without announcement. What we talk about is the surface of things, and I have come to understand that the surface of things, maintained with care and shown up for consistently, is itself a form of love. Not the only form, not the deepest form, but the form that is possible right now, with this particular man in this particular season of his life. And possible is not nothing. Possible is, sometimes, everything. There's something about the village on a Wednesday evening, early evening, the light going, that I want to try to put into words. The people here at this hour are people who work nearby and are finishing their day in the particular way that the village allows, which is slower and less efficient than Midtown's ending, but considerably more humane. Artists coming out of studios, writers coming out of whatever corner they've claimed. A group of 3 young men walking together with the energy of people who are in the middle of a very important conversation about something. They'll be at it for hours. I recognize the posture. I've been in those conversations. A woman with a shopping basket moving quickly, with the purposeful efficiency of someone who has dinner to make and the knowledge of exactly how to make it. A couple on the bench across the street. They're not young. They're my father's age, maybe older, and they're sitting close enough that their shoulders touch. Not romantically, not dramatically, just present to each other. He's talking, she's listening. Not performing the listening, actually doing it. Turned toward him with the specific quality of someone for whom this particular voice is still interesting after all the years of it. I watch them for a minute. I think about what that is, what it takes, what you have to have chosen repeatedly over many years to arrive at a bench on a Wednesday in November where you're still turned toward each other. Not because the alternative doesn't exist. It exists. It's available. The world is full of alternatives. But because you kept choosing this. I find that not enviable. That's the wrong word, because envy implies I want what they have, and that's not exactly it. I find it instructive. Evidence of something real. Evidence that the thing is possible. The sustained version. The one that survives time and circumstance, and all the weather that comes for a life. I don't know if I'll have that. I'm 32, and I live alone on West 54th Street, with a hissing radiator and a neighbor's geranium, and a career that requires everything and gives back something that isn't certainty or security or a couple on a bench. I don't know, but I believe in it. I believe it happens because I can see that it happens, right there, across the street. 2 people on a bench in the cold with their shoulders touching. Belief that is evidence-based is the only kind I can sustain. Elise asked me something before I left her studio that I've been carrying since. She said, "If Thursday doesn't go the way you want, what do you do Friday?" I said, "Get up, go to Manny's, have the coffee." She said, "And then?" I said, "Then I start preparing for the next one." She said, "Is that enough?" I looked at her. I said, "Some days it's everything." She nodded. She turned back to the canvas. I put on my coat and left, and the last thing I saw was her standing in front of the canvas in the studio light, holding the brush she'd been holding when I arrived, and this time she was using it. I take comfort in that. In the image of Elise using the brush. In the proof of the thing continuing. The evening is coming. Down here in the village, the evening comes differently. Not the abrupt transition of Midtown, where the office lights replace the daylight and the shift happens fast and functional, but a gradual dimming, the street lights coming on one by one, the cafes and bars filling slowly, the temperature dropping degree by degree until the cold is definitive and requires acknowledgement. I'm going to finish this wine. Then I'm going to walk to the subway, the long way, through the park, past the fountain. Because the long way through this neighborhood at this hour is a thing worth doing. A thing that costs nothing except time, and returns something that I can't put a price on, but that I know the value of. Tomorrow is Thursday. I've told you about Thursday enough. It lives in this week like a weather system. Everything organized around it, everything pointing toward it. I'm ready. I've been ready. The readiness is an old friend at this point. What I want to tell you, coming out of this Wednesday, coming out of Elise's studio and the couple on the bench and the gray coat in the window and the conversation about what things are for, is this. It matters. Whatever happens tomorrow in that room, it matters that I went. It matters that I prepared. It matters that I've spent 6 years learning how to be the person who walks into that room and says these words and means them. Not because it guarantees anything, not because the industry keeps its promises or distributes its outcomes fairly or operates according to the logic of the deserving. It doesn't, and I know it doesn't. But the mattering is not contingent on the outcome. Elise's paintings matter whether or not the gallery fills up. Clara Marsh's plays matter whether or not the producer's money holds. My father's store mattered, the 20 years of it, the smell of it, the paint on his hands when I was born. It mattered. And the closing didn't unmatter the mattering. The work is real while you're doing it. That's what I kept coming back to today in Elise's studio, watching her stand in front of a canvas with a brush and a thought, and the complete commitment of someone who has decided that this is what she's for. The work is real. It's real right now, in this moment, on this Wednesday. Thursday will take care of itself. Come back tomorrow. I'll tell you what happens in the room.